Hey everybody, this is Perch. I'm responding to something I haven't seen or heard, but I've had a couple of you send me notes about this, and I don't know when this was said, if it's new, if it's old. It lines up, with what I've heard from this creator before, but I don't know the exact quote. So there's a possibility some of this is taken out of context, but that's okay. It's not relevant for the video as a whole. But basically, the situation is this. The summary is that Mark Miller, who we've interviewed on the show twice, I think, at least, um, he is the creator of Kick Ass, Nemesis, Civil War, Superman Red Sun, lots of comics, long career. And basically, the quote or what's being attributed to him is that conservatives are needed in comics to write characters like the Punisher in order to understand them. That if you don't have conservatives writing characters like that, how can they ever truly get the character? And and thus it's a problem. It doesn't work if you don't have conservatives writing the Punisher, and presumably, I don't know, other characters that fit into the Punisher type of vein. Um, I don't know. Maybe you make an argument Batman sits in there. I'm not sure what. I'm not sure how far that bubble extends. And so it's created a bit of a stir, if you will. And I think there has been, and this always gets people to start to run in and go, well, I think this creator is good at the Punisher. All right, to me, who are the best Punisher writers? Um, Garth Ennis is probably the name that comes to mind the most for me. I think you have Chuck Dixon, yeah, Mike Barron, of course. They're both conservatives. Um, I think, that people have come on and off of writing great Punisher stories. I mean, some of you may be surprised by this one, and I think there's definitely a way it began and a way it ended. I actually think Matt Fraction didn't do a bad job at the beginning of some of his stories when he was writing. I definitely think it didn't end well. But anyway, I don't put him in the same league as say Garth Ennis. I think Garth Ennis is wrote an amazing Punisher. Um, but for the topic in general, so again, whether that's truly what he said was taken out of context, if there's some nuance to it, I don't know. Um, I'll take it from a different perspective. First of all, I don't think it's liberal or conservative exactly that indicates how you're writing a character, if you're good at writing a character or not. Political ideologies be what they are. I think it's more around kind of your imagination and what it is that you choose to dream or think about with character. The challenge, I think, with some writers, and here we'll say some liberal writers, if you will, is that they're unhappy with the superhero genre in general, and they view their stories as a means to express their values. And here's where I think conservatives in specifically the genre of superheroes is by its nature more um, fantastical, a little bit more black and white in terms of hero and villainy, a little bit more you know power and what you can do with it. I mean, those types of elements play into superhero books. And superhero books are generally not served by getting into things like, but what's the effect on the environment, and how do we feel about more nuanced personal rights and other things. I mean, for example, a conservative who is pro Second Amendment can write a story about how guns are in a world of superheroes without, if you will, preaching on the good or bad of guns. Guns are more just a factor of that universe. But if you have somebody like Superman comes around, then guns are fairly useless against that character. And I think somebody who's pro Second Amendment will have one way of looking at it, whereas somebody who is against the Second Amendment, will struggle not to have the hero, in this case, like have Superman want to editorialize on why guns are bad and people shouldn't have them and other things. And I think some of those values or some of those perspectives are just harder to pull off inside of a superhero comic. I think conservative values are easier to pull off in a superhero comic than liberal values. But this isn't like I'm not saying this in a really aggressive way. I think it's a very light way. I think it all comes back to talent. If you are very talented and you have a high imagination and you can kind of think about what makes superhero books tick, then I think whether you're right wing, left wing, conservative, or liberal, it becomes somewhat irrelevant. A really good writer knows how to put those things on the shelf. I may be wildly mistaken, but Garth Ennis isn't. I thought Garth Ennis was left leaning, although maybe I'm wrong about that. But I could swear that's the case. And yet, if you read a lot of Garth Ennis books, you have biting satire. You have a bunch of things in there that I think are perfectly suited for the superhero genre. I think he does a great job with it. Um, this is not a hard and fast rule. I just well, I guess my perspective is coming from this place. I've sat around a table with a bunch of very left wing writers, people who are hardcore anti-Trumpers, and I watched them talk about how they could reflect, the things that are going on in the world and how they could, use kind of their comic to point out, why Trump was wrong. And I think no matter what your politics are, I think if you are the writer of, Wolverine or Captain America, and you say, all right, I don't like Trump. Now, how do I fit that mentality into my comic? Or I care a lot about, global warming. How do I fit that into my comic? I think you're immediately on the wrong track. I think that I think that a decent amount of writers, and I think those who are pretty far on the political spectrum, one direction or another, I think people who are really, really extreme in those areas, they think about their politics and they think about their ideology first. And then they think about the actual superhero and the setting and all the rest of that stuff second. And I think if you put them in that order, you're screwed. I just, I think your odds of getting a good story, now, not impossible. I think your odds of getting a good story plummets at that point because you're looking at the wrong thing. And I think in some cases you're going against the genre you're working in. Superhero comics, and I don't mean this to be insulting to superhero comics, but by nature, they're meant to be fantastical. They're meant to not follow heavy rules. I mean, superhero comics don't work if you think about heavy rules. You have time travel in both the DC and the Marvel universe on some level. And I understand, you try and back into it a little bit with well, yeah, but if you change one thing, how does it impact other things? And the world could be worse. But basically, if you have the Flash or you have the Fantastic Four, and I understand the Fantastic Four did do this issue, but it didn't make a lot of sense. You could go back in time and stop that school shooting, right? You could go back in time. Like you have the Flash, when the Flash was able to race through time fairly easily. Are you telling me that, Sandy Hook or the kind of the various school shootings, are you telling me that it's the superhero sitting around a table going, man, it could very, very, very easily go back in time a week and stop that school shooting, apprehend the shooter before they ever walk through the door. But if we did that, I don't know, it might set off a chain reaction and things would be even worse. Really? I mean, I understand the logistics of, hey, there's crime going on in the world constantly and it's impossible to keep up with all of it. And, murders happen every day and it's just too hard to stop that. But when you have an event like 9/11 or a school shooting, like 9/11, Flash go back in time with Green Lantern. You could pull out that ring. You could just grab the plane and, land it on the ground. You do that all the time in comics. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I say this from the standpoint of, if that's true, then I think, and you try and root too much of your comic in reality or in social causes, I think it just sets you up for failure. I think it's hard to do it properly. And I think you have to fully commit to it, or then you set up an even weirder thing like, well, okay, so why is it okay to stop this school shooting but not the next school shooting? I mean, just then you're in this weird place where the heroes are picking and then they're not heroes at that point. So I just, I think comics are superhero comics are a genre, like horror is a genre, like lots of things are, like these properties that we all love and enjoy. Um, they are, they have rules in them. They have, and so if you break those rules, I think you're not you do a bad job in the genre. And so, in terms of like, does a conservative need to write the Punisher? No. But somebody who knows how to follow the rules and isn't going to say, the reason why I'm on the Punisher, Jason Aaron, is, to point out that his ways are toxic and that he's wrong for what he's doing and that, he's a bad guy. If you approach the pitch that way, then you shouldn't be writing the Punisher. You're not, the goal of that character is not to point out that, he must be a deeply disturbed psychopath. Everybody gets that. He's dressed up in a black suit with a skull in his chest, shooting people, and he clearly has a, personal death wish and is suicidal. We all get it. Like, everybody gets that he is, he's off his nut. I mean, everybody knows this. That's not the fun part of the story. The fun part of the story is watching him, engage and at times get in over his head. He's just a normal guy. How can he stop all these people? And that's what it is. So I think the challenge with somebody who's very liberal and believes it's their duty to espouse liberal ideology within their work, and then you put them on the Punisher, like it's mixing peanut butter and sardines. Those do not go together. And so I think, I guess conservatives have an either easier go of it, but to me, it's are you able to put your personal politics, your ideas behind you when you sit down to write that story and write something that's true to the character and true to the genre? Can you do that? That's a prerequisite for getting the job, is that you need to be able to think in the head of the character. And I've known plenty of very left-wing, people, very Democrats who, are talented enough, mature enough, whatever you want to say, able to kind of say, okay, the assignment is this character. Therefore, I need to write something and I need to put this character in a situation that fits. And, now's not the time to, I get put on Captain America and I am vegan. And so I'm going to have Captain America talk about why he shouldn't eat meat. No, that is not a good use of time in a superhero book. Don't do that. That's kind of the point. So I don't know. I don't think that it's a longer video, and I guess I'm raising a topic for maybe other people to play with, and that is, if the genre is YA, if the genre is fantasy romance, if the genre is horror, if the genre is Western, are there certain ideologies that work better for those genres? Maybe. Superheroes, maybe. All that said, 5 years ago, I said, I don't like books that are heavily immediately political. And don't give me that shit. If you're new to this channel, please do not come in and do that shit of like, but comic books have always been political. Oh, fuck off with that. You know what? Either you're deliberately, dense, or you don't know what you're deliberately being dumb about the topic. Yes, comic books have always had politics, but comic books also have tended to have editors that made sure that the characters acted like they are. They haven't, they prevented superhero characters from becoming mouthpieces for somebody's agenda. That's the difference. And so, I think it really comes down to that. I don't want politics like that in the comics. Obviously, Captain America, by his nature, is a political character, but that doesn't mean he needs to come out and, and talk about whatever if Captain America is saving the world from aliens, do we need a comic book where Captain America comes out and says trans rights are human rights? Is that necessary for Captain America? I mean, whatever the political du jour topic of the day is. I don't think so. I don't think it's necessary. But keep in mind, this didn't just start in 2016. It happened before, just at a lesser frequency. But the solution is, by the way, is not to go the other direction. There is no way in hell I want writers getting put on Marvel books going,
Make America great again. I am, I'm down with JD Vance. No, nobody no, I don't want that. I don't want it cuts both ways. Don't want crazy liberal politics. Don't want crazy conservative politics. I want superhero books with superhero shit, doing superhero things. That's what I want because that's the genre. And generally, when you try and mix those things in, the vast majority of writers are not skilled enough to do that in an effective way. Just not. Anyway, thanks for listening.